From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. Happy Valentine's Day, TheraPals. We love you all so much, and we thank you for letting us stumble our way into your hearts like Tom Brady at a boat party. And now, broadcasting from the churn, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some Pod Therapy.
I'm sad at how out of date all of that was.
I don't care.
By the time people hear this, that will all be a distant memory.
I read a story yesterday, as we're recording yesterday, about the granddaughter of the guy that designed the Lombardi Trophy. The granddaughter of the silversmith that designed the Lombardi Trophy, demanding an apology from Tom Brady.
He'll
for
get that.
tossing the trophy from boat to boat. I was like, yeah, hold your breath on that.
Yeah. The greatest quarterback who's ever lived is going to take a second to tell you that.
I want the people who made the Stanley Cup to call that person and be like, "Yo, seriously,
settle down."
What year was that? I can't remember what year it was. It was a long time ago. Smitty would probably know, and I believe it was the Toronto Maple Leafs the last time they won it. That they had it in a hotel, and somehow it caught fire. So they had to piss on it to put it out. Yeah, that's a true story. Like, that has been
Nobody
so
even
much.
cares. Like, because it's hockey, we're all like, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's probably the most dignified thing that happened to that night. Well, we should introduce the other voice that you're hearing. With us today, we have a guest for the first part of the show, and we are super excited to welcome Matt Donnelly from Matt and Mattingly's Ice Cream Social and Penn Sunday School and your local strip club. We are super excited to have you with us, man.
Yes. Yeah. I'm a 7-star member at all the things you just described. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're super excited to have you. So real quick backstory for the general audience. Obviously, a good number of our listenership has come to us from Ice Cream Social, so they obviously know who you are. There's a percentage out there that found us through other methods. So Matt and Paul and Jacob, they all run a show called Matt and Mattingly's Ice Cream Social. And years ago, Nick and I sent in a Jeopardy, or what was it?
Jock versus Nerd.
Jock versus Nerd trivia challenge. And it was mental health related. And so they ran it on the show. And the guys turned out to be really pro mental health. And I had never even heard of the show at that point. Nick was a big fan. But it was surprising because here's this comedy podcast that is really, really funny. It centers on improvisation and just, authenticity and being real. But then the show over the years has not shied away from going into the lane of being very honest. And all three of the hosts have been serious about mental health. They've shared about their own journeys about mental health, their own treatment for mental health. And I found that extremely genuine and attractive. And then obviously our shows became friends, and now we record in the churn, and we share a lot of listenership, which is great. But that has been on my mind for years, that I've always wanted to bring Matt on the show and talk about that, because he's always been really honest on his own show, and it's discussed. So that's what brings us here today. And so, Matt, we're super glad that you're with us, super excited to get to talk to you about it. But let me start with this question. In your show, and obviously you're an entertainer, you're a comedian, you're a magician, and in all that reality, you've chosen still to be pretty honest about your own mental health stuff. Have you ever regretted that? Has that ever become something scary to you? How did you break through that stigma to be honest about your own mental health, despite being a professional funny person?
Oh, I don't know if I've ever. No, I've never regretted being honest about my own mental health. I mean, if there's anything about living a very kind of public or vulnerable, person in media, I guess, my own little media world. I'd say that maybe now as I get older with my wife and my 2 children, I only get a little hesitant about talking about them or saying their names and things like that, just because they didn't sign up for that. But I've been in entertainment since I was, been trying to do comedy stuff since I was 15 years old. And at the same time, I also went to school that had performing arts major. And so I majored in acting. And so kind of honesty and vulnerability and comedy have always gone hand in hand with me. I don't see a disconnect between that at all. And I'd say in terms of like, being honest about my mental health, I mean, therapists and psychiatrists and stuff have saved my soul, like saved my life and my family's life. And so I have been open about that my whole life because even when I was young, I couldn't believe there was a stigma about going to see a therapist or going to see a psychologist because because before I could even hear of a stigma, one had already intervened in my life and in a way that was so beneficial that I couldn't even be self-conscious about it.
Wow. I was going to ask you that. So I knew it was pretty young when you kind of first met a therapist.
Yeah. So, So right before I turned 5, my mother died of a heart attack while we were on a family vacation. And so not only did we all lose my mother, but we all kind of witnessed it. And so that was a truly traumatic experience. And so, so my earliest memories are in Dr. Mark Reuter's office is our whole family sitting around and talking, and then all of us having our individual sessions as well. And that was all happening when I was in first grade,
And do you remember that fondly? Like, was that a good experience for you?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, if I high school ended up changing a lot of different things for me, but up until 8th grade and stuff, I was saying I wanted to be a therapist. I wanted to be a psychologist.
You're too funny for the job. Sorry. We're not supposed to have exciting personalities.
I was going to say when I realized I couldn't talk to a mirror as a job, then I feel like entertainment was the way to go. That was the way I could.
I kept trying to make the patient laugh. I have a solid hour, and I'm just working on my set.
Come on, buddy.
In my experience, therapists are not funny.
Yeah.
No, as a matter of fact, even my brother, who's a Division I basketball player at Davidson, and went on to play semi-pro, his major in college at Davidson was psychology.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah. So it's something that we've been talking about it. Even when I got put on antidepressants at one point, I chose to take antidepressants on the advice of my, and I just called them up and said, "Hey, who's taking what?" And we all just kind of had like a powwow, talk about like what we're taking and what's going on. So I think, I guess I can credit even having an early family support structure about it early that made it okay with me. And then as going up into comedy, I got to do Wayne Brady's show out here when it was at the Venetian. And he, ended up conceding, and a big article came out where he's talked about battling depression. We were doing Ice Cream Social in the early days when Robin Williams took his own life. And that was just something that had a huge impact on the community. And I just, when I read about things like getting mental health and having a stigma, I just think it's one of the easiest things for me to be an advocate for. I have no problem being very confident about people getting therapists and people getting, help from professionals.
Well, it shows. I mean, obviously, in your show has a very big community, and it's got a culture to it. And that was one of the things I know for me in my pre-Scoop life. I didn't know anything about the show. I didn't know anything about you guys' reality. And then when our show kind of got absorbed into it, I was surprised at how this was a comedy podcast. And it's like, it's yucks. It's fun times. It's a break from life. And this community was like, oh no, we are all about mental health. Like, we have chat rooms about it. Like, we talk about it all the time. The hosts are extremely, supportive of it. They push us, and we all hold each other accountable to get help. And I was just sitting there like, dude, I have never seen this. Like, I'm still to this day baffled that a podcast community has become so. I joke that it's like militantly pro mental health. Like, and I love it. I think it's wonderful. But you guys obviously created that.
I think comedy has its own stigmas too, right? And I think people think of it as an adversarial relationship. They think of comedy stand-up comedians handling hecklers in a comedy club or something, or getting torn to pieces and things like that. Not too dissimilar from therapists, right? The people that are so afraid to go see a therapist are so afraid they're like, they're going to tell me, and they just laundry list their own imposter syndrome list as they don't want to, say I want to get help kind of thing. They'll just tell me we're not supposed to be together. They'll just tell me that I'm terrible, And I was like, I don't know. You clearly have never gone to see a therapist. They would not be in business if that's all they did. So same with comedy. And so Paul and I come from an improv background, and in improv, especially the long form style of comedy, which I don't know we need to get into here, but just basically where you have to have 6 to 8 people relying on each other in a fluid, creative environment. You really these places like Improv Olympic and Second City and Upright Citizens Brigade really fostered communities, and I'd say that about improv across the board. Like there are improv theaters open up across the country. In almost every major town and city, there's an improv theater, and that's not because everybody there gets to get on Saturday Night Live. It's there because it's an outlet for people that helps them really discover tools on how to interact, how to co-create, how to cooperate. How to put out your creative energy without feeling self-conscious about it. And that's why these theaters were open. And that's why these communities exist. And so Paul and I were really excited to bring that to podcasting. I was a co-host on Penn Sunday School. Paul was a podcast on Geek Shock. And so we actually understood the power of podcasting before we teamed up to do our own. And so that we have a community that shares these good tenets is really something that I feel so lucky to have, because we understood that being a podcaster means like you are having really intimate conversations with people when they are alone,
Yeah.
And so like when they're at the gym or they're in the car or they're going for a walk or whatever, where they're out with their dog, you are the voice in their head. You are the conversation they're having. And so we never wanted to take that lightly. So no matter what we're making fun of, what we're joking around about, we never wanted to be at the expense of the listener themselves.
Right. Yeah. With the exception of Jim's mom, because
it's fine. Yeah.
She's a bat. I'm talking about humans.
Oh, you're right.
She's not listening. She's a bat. She's looking for us via echolocation, sure, but she's not listening to the show.
She's enjoying some fruit.
I guess.
And Matt, I do have to correct you on one point. I don't know if you've seen Saturday Night Live lately, but everybody who does any of those improv classes now, they all get on Saturday Night Live.
That's true. Yeah, they're all from the Pensacola, Florida theater sports team.
Yeah.
And the intro and Hoboken.
Yeah, the intro to SNL has gotten extremely long. It's 2 hours of watching all these montages of people walking by with their names.
They're all in
Bobby
matching
Moynihan,
shirts.
though, still going strong.
Yeah. Hang in there, 100%. Keenan. But no, I think that you're saying a lot of things that are fascinating about this. That the nature of podcasting, the nature of comedy, lending itself to being mental health focused.
Well, and I was also just thinking, just the entertainment industry itself. Like, if you're in it for a long time, you have to develop some healthy coping skills, and you have to develop some sense of community, because it seems very feast or famine. Especially like in Las Vegas, where you could be headlining a show one week, and then the next week, like it's just done, and you have to find something else to do, and that can be incredibly stressful.
Being in entertainment means handling a lot of rejection all the time. And that's something that is absolutely a factor in why there's so much crossover between mental health advocates and people in entertainment, is because you're getting rejected for jobs all the time. You're getting rejected for work all the time, or you're reading stuff. If the more popular you get, the more you just read stuff about what people don't like about you, right? So I got to go on Fool Us last year, or 2 years ago now. That clip is blown up, and then what does that mean? It means that I get emails that say new YouTube comment, and it's emotional roulette every time. Click on the new comment to find out whether or not I am a horrible person or a good person, kind of thing. So it's just part of the deal. Yes, there are a bunch of coping mechanisms, and those coping mechanisms are preached and coached and given to one another all the time, for sure.
Yeah. No, it's a tremendous thing. I think being in Las Vegas and being a Las Vegas therapist, that's an area that whenever I go to conferences and I talk to colleagues in other states, it's very different. Like as a therapist in Las Vegas, you're working with a lot of entertainers, and it's fascinating to get a glimpse into what that mindset is, exactly what you're talking about. It's the rejection, it's the instability, it's the rush and the euphoria, it's the creative energy. But it's also dog eat dog, and like there's all these different aspects of it. It's an incredible reality, an ecosystem unlike anything else that I've ever seen, and it's hard to survive in for a lot of people. It's a huge mentally taxing reality.
Yeah, it is. It is. And honestly, like what's crazy is like most of the time the solution is like a lot more empathy, right? Like, so when someone says something horrible about you, first you want to take it so personally, and then you have to be like, don't let this person you don't know control your life, and then think, why is this person taking time out of their day to lash out at you? Why are they taking time out of their day to write something horrible? And it just speaks to some, and so you start to answer those questions in any way, you paint a picture of someone that you sympathize with, that you feel bad for. Sarah Silverman has done an excellent job on social media doing this all the time. I mean, one guy went after her and said horrible things, and she said, hey, I clicked in your bio, I saw you're going through a hard time, hey, can everybody pitch in and pay this guy's medical bills, and got this guy's medical bills paid. I mean, she's done all kinds of that kind of thing. And because basically both as a coping mechanism, as an item of protection, and an item of empathy, is the same thing, which is you say, hey, you're not anonymous, you're not invisible.
Right.
You're saying something and you are heard. So if you're trying to hurt me, I want you to know that I'm hearing you, and you're successful. Is that what you want? I'm hurt, and so I think like we've let our listeners know on High Ice Cream Social like how delicate we are. So we always say like, if you want to write in and criticize us, please do. We want to get things right, but please be respectful when you do it. We're much more. We are
delicate flowers.
We're much more likely to respond to it. And so, anytime we get something wrong, we always just say, "Hey, sorry." Write us, and we'll read it on the air, or come on and talk, and we'll do it on the air. And we have no problem getting it right. I'd say like one of the things that I was most challenged by and now most proud of with Ice Cream Social is I really, we started this podcast 8 years ago. I really was not fully understanding of the trans community. I wanted to be on the right side of history. I wanted to get it right, but I really felt poorly equipped to do so. And sure enough, we had listeners of the trans community, and they just started writing in, and we started reading it on air,
Yeah.
And even still, we still will, we're in comedy, so we've still gotten it wrong sometimes, casually still joking up the hip or having old comedic habits from the 80s and 90s that don't work now. But we've always, as soon as we're called out for it, we apologize, and we will say, what do you need to say on air? Do you want to keep it off air? What can we do? Can I write you privately? Can I do whatever? Can we just make this right? And we do our best to kind of keep things in line. But I find myself now being the person who speaks to other people in my own community about like, no, and trying to clean up stuff that I've learned about helping to include people in the trans community, like you should include everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's amazing how much I think empathy, humanity changes an internal perspective, and it's a delicate dance. Whenever you're an entertainer and you're a comedian, you have to poke fun at life, and some of that has to be irreverent, and it can't be too red tapey. But at the same time, there's a way to do it in a tasteful way that you don't regret at the end of the day. Earlier, you mentioned that several of the defining moments of your life, obviously very significant childhood trauma. You mentioned depression a little bit ago. You talked about using medicine for that. And you've mentioned in sort of the intro that over the years, you've had different episodes where you've worked with a therapist and for whatever amount of time. And I'm sure that changes throughout life. And I guess one of the things I'm curious about in your own journey of sitting in a therapy room, talking to a therapist, doing that internal work, I wonder if you have kind of a few thoughts on what are some of the biggest things that you feel like you've gained from that? Sometimes it's like some guidance. Sometimes it's like I have some, rules of living that I've actually kind of acquired through therapy that, sayings that stay in my head. And sometimes it's not so much a literal saying as it is a perspective or some general insight that people have gained in therapy that they take with them into real life. I just want to see if you could reflect on that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my mind was like swimming as you were framing the question, but for sure, one of the most, well, I guess, so I'll start at the top, which is like you don't realize how much you carry your friends' emotions when you talk to them about your problems, right? Mm-hmm. And so like there's a part of you that like doesn't want to put too much on them or burden them too much with your problems when you talk about your problems. There's almost these like language of exchange, like let's exchange an amount of our problems with each other that we can help cope with each other, right? And so the first thing you realize when you talk to a professional whose job is to listen to all of your shit is like, oh, there's no currency here. Like they have a job and you don't have to feel bad being completely self-centered for an hour, like it is completely, on you to talk all about you to this person, and that just goes right. And so that's already a freedom there too. I mean, the hardest part about burdening yourself with mental health issues is feeling like all of your problems are unique and unsolvable, right? And so the first thing that kind of comes to light as you talk to someone is they'll give you terminology and practice stuff for stuff that like you thought you were alone on. So oftentimes just hearing that there's terminology or a practice is like, oh God, good. Someone has done this before.
What am I doing again? What's the word for that? Okay, let me write that down.
Because oftentimes, it is unique to you and it is unique to whoever you're with, whoever you're, if you're married or boyfriend, girlfriend or whatever, like whoever you're with also probably doesn't have this armed with this terminology and armed with this practice, and so it is easy to kind of poke your head around to people around you and feel like, wow, no one gets me, and so the first power you get is that, on very personal levels, I'd say that like it's very easy to play head games with yourself, especially when you're an actor in entertainment. You kind of always morph into what you think other people need anyway. And so it's easy to think like you're doing that in your real life too. And so where therapy has helped me is where I feel like I might have like created somebody my wife wanted to marry instead of being the person my wife wanted to marry would be a big one.
Right.
And feeling like I might be exposed or something like that, and really and therapy was a huge help in guiding myself through that. When you experience trauma as a child, you have a license to use as an excuse to be a terrible person when you want to be, and therapy is a really good way to not use that, not to pull that trigger. Right. And there are times where I felt very self-destructive, and just think it'd be a lot easier if I just started over in a new place, new job, new friends, new everything. And there are times in my life where I absolutely did that. And those were the times where I was not seeing a therapist or, I mean, I basically would, someone in first grade and someone in fourth grade. And like, I just kept finding ways to see one. And in high school, I was very lucky to have an amazing guidance counselor. Most people make fun of guidance counselors, and I had like someone who became like a surrogate mother to me. And so high school was like really a productive time for me. And then, don't have it. After that, flip out in depression, move to the Virgin Islands, live in the Caribbean as a bartender and a housekeeper, and then come back and get my hands on a therapist and get things better.
The Caribbean, the chief import of the Caribbean is mental illness.
Nobody goes there.
That's probably pretty close to true.
That's 100%. Yeah. No one goes there because their life worked out perfectly. Graduated Harvard, opened up the scuba shop. and in fact, it's its own lesson in mental health is that everyone moves down there because their life got crazy, terrible, and they had to just get away from it all. And everyone just has a matching story of like, yep, me too. Yeah, that's why I got here. And so you lose all value of how exciting it is to move there.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd say like my therapist now, my biggest job is to constantly govern what actually is my problem to solve and what isn't my problem to solve.
That's huge.
She always we say, not my monkey, not my circus.
Yep.
And so when I bring up stuff that's really bothering me and stuff like that, she'll be like, is this for you to solve or is this someone else's problem that you're taking on? And she just helps, Kelsey, keep my priority in order, kiddos and wife first, then, my direct, endeavors next. And, then I can start to help other people out kind of thing. So it's a big thing. And I think that's a larger problem than we realize. I think one of the hard parts about the internet era is I think we have access to so many problems. We have so much access to stuff that needs help and that we know that it needs help. And so I think it can get overwhelming that we need to do stuff. And then I think there's backlash where you got to shut it down. And then instead of just realizing it's outside of my power to help at the moment, we hear someone say like, well, they deserve it, or like, actually, if they did this or that, then this never would have happened. And so you buy into these really caustic, unempathetic thoughts because it bails you out of your own emotional crap. And so instead of just actually realizing like, yes, that problem exists. I mean, I find it do with my kids all the time. Like, yep, that problem exists. And you and I, we can't do much about it right now. Maybe one day we can. It's worth just acknowledging, but we have resources and we'll figure out what we can and can't do, but we don't want to turn our backs on things that we know.
Yeah. One thing that you said that's really funny, the not my monkey, not my circus is a big saying in the recovery community too.
Yeah.
Most of my work is with drug and alcohol and yeah, that's a big thing that we always try to emphasize is being able to sort through things and identify, that this is unfortunate, but there's nothing I can do about it. So we have to learn to live with it. But there's a lot of things that you said that I can relate to. I went through a very messy divorce and I ended up going into therapy. And the same thing that you were talking about, where I had a support system. I had a lot of people that were willing to, answer my phone call in the middle of the night, and help me process things. But having that freedom to have somebody that I can pay and talk to and not feel bad about it is just so powerful. But one of my questions that I always like to ask people that have been involved in therapy, and it's good for me and Jim to hear this, is from your perspective, what do you think are the qualities that you feel make a really good therapist?
I'm so glad you're asking that because I've heard him talk about his therapist on his show before. And every time I'm like, God, I just want to ask him, not who it is, because that's fine. But like, it sounds like they have quite the personality. And I just think every therapist is very different. And one of the best measures of success for a patient is, do they jive well with that person's humanity? Like, it doesn't matter how many books that therapist has read or what technique they're using. The most powerful factor in change and in healing is the personality. So I'm really glad you asked that. So tell us about your therapist.
It's funny. She's an addiction counselor. And I found her like locally. But I wanted basically like one of the conclusions coming to, couples therapy and things like that is that basically like I do things in like obsessive bursts and I'm not an organized person. And therefore that basically that power can be very good or very bad. And so I can be a very fixated and determined person and develop like systems and things like that very quickly. And so even though I might not have like a classic addiction that people can put a stamp on, as soon as I started talking to an addiction counselor, I found a lot of addiction therapy to be very, very helpful to my problems and my personalities. And basically I just count myself fortunate that it didn't become drugs or alcohol. But I have rubber bands on my wrists, also a sign of addiction therapy, and they are indeed
the snapping.
They are indeed two things to remind me of two things every day. And so I find it to be very helpful. I've gone to recovery meetings and things like that too. And again, I think just the discipline of having a thing on the calendar to just go do to get your life in pattern is something I like a lot, and like your other guests, some of your other guests, I'm an atheist. And so the higher power thing's a tricky wicket, but it's still a lot. I found a lot of it helpful. So my therapist and addiction counselor, she's honestly, she's a badass black lady. And I was like, I wanted somebody who would make sure to call me on my shit all the time. I wanted somebody who was not, I did actually feel like because of my fixation abilities, I feel like I had an ability to be manipulative, and I feel like I had an ability to be very manipulative, and especially when I was younger and more egotistical. I feel like I did a lot of things out of manipulation. And I wanted to make sure I had somebody who would not be outfoxed. So as brash as that is to say, but she's got like 10 degrees. She's a recovery of abuse. She's in her own recovery of addiction. She's a recovery of a tremendous amount of abuse. So like my story's got nothing on her stories. And so I found that to be very humbling and great to be around. And so she's just someone I keep in my life. And at one point, actually, like things were going well enough, she's like, "Do you want to keep coming?" And I just said, like, "Look, every time I feel like I've gone to this place, I've signed off with whatever therapist I've had, and then I find myself 2 years in a really weird place in my life, in a different location, and a different spot, and I'm married with 2 kids. I don't have that option anymore. So no, we're going to keep meeting no matter what, and we're just going to keep checking in no matter what."
Just show up and say it's been a good week.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a lot cheaper than going to the Virgin Islands.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I still have to, like, I'm going to meet with her. So I still have to take a big assessment before I head into it to meet with her. So I still have to, and that pattern forces me to take inventory. I'm really so grateful to her, because there's sometimes I was in a very bad place, and it almost did cost me my family. And so, she was instrumental, and so she takes pride in talking to me and everybody, knowing everything's okay as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it makes a difference knowing that you have an appointment coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Because like you said, I think it really does create a sense of awareness in your life that you may not otherwise have. If you know that, oh, something happened, I want to make sure I bring this up in therapy this week, right. Whereas it's something that you focus on then, as opposed to just kind of dismissing and letting go.
Yeah, and I love that phrase, emotional inventory. Yeah. I think that's 100%. Sometimes, and we've talked about this on the show, and I'm so glad Matt's talking about it, because a lot of times you show up in therapy because there's this big, huge, glaring, smoking problem in your life, and then over time it starts to go away, and it's entirely appropriate to say, "I'm done, thank you, let's go about our lives." And it's also equally appropriate to say, "You know what, this has turned out to be emotional yoga for me. I'm going to come in here and stretch, and it's good maintenance. It keeps me healthy." And Matt, I know you have to go. I know you have a big schedule today, but I want to give you a chance to say a final word. You demographically represent a hurting population in our society right now. White men in their 30s and 40s are leading in pandemics of mental health when it comes to depression, suicide, drug and alcohol abuse. And you, I think, are a conspicuous advocate for mental health, which I think has helped a lot of people who, and we've gotten that question to our show where they've said, "Hey, listening to middle-aged white guys talk about emotions and shit has been really good for me and has given me permission to do it too." And a lot of people, find confidence in that. And so as a last word, because I know you have to run, I wanted to give you a chance to speak to anybody out there who might be struggling. You as a human, obviously, we as therapists, we're telling people to get help, and they're like, "Okay, whatever. You guys literally have a livelihood based on us doing that." But, you as a civilian and a patient yourself, I just want to give you an opportunity to give a message of encouragement to anybody out there that might need to hear it today.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to fight this alone, I mean, like, and it's just a matter of that, like, we pay people to take away our trash. We pay people to, clean stuff or whatever. Like, is there an amount of money you'd pay to, like, get up out of bed more easily? to like sleep easier, or to feel like you're being your authentic self when you're interacting with someone you care about, like what's the price on that? And I to me, it's a lot. So, it's just a matter of that, like, we also tend to treat, I'd say like the biggest lesson I learned from marriage counseling, which is like, and something that you can learn for yourself at home is like, the biggest lesson I learned was like treating home like neutral, right? I go out and I do other things and try to improve other things. And I come home and boom, home base. And then all of a sudden I was like, no. Home is where I'm also supposed to work. Home is where I'm also supposed to improve. And so you're either making things better or things might be suffering from neglect, right? And so if something is in your life, you got to start putting in the work. And if that's the case, you might need help, and you might need someone who actually has written a guidebook or two that can give you some to-dos. And that's always my magic word is like to-do. Can I put a to-do list together here? All right, I got this going on. And what are my to-dos? I do blank, blank, and blank, and I got to take it. And I don't move on to step 2 until I've done step 1, And I think like that is one of the most important things you can do. And it's also one of the most refreshing things you can do. You're not helpless. That it is on you, that it does take effort. I think is actually something that's refreshing for people to hear and not scary. I think feeling helpless is feeling like there's nowhere to put my effort. That's what's scary. But like, hey, there's places to put your effort. There's things you can do where you put the work in and you will get results and you will see improvement. And that's such a refreshing thing to hear sometimes, because we don't think about our brain and the way our brain works like we think about a project around the house, but it works exactly the same.
Yep, exactly.
Well said. Well said. So Matt Donnelly of Matt Mattingly's Ice Cream Social. You can find the podcast. Just type in Matt Mattingly's Ice Cream Social.
They know where to go.
They know where to go. Just go to Hey Scoops, heyscoops.com. He's also a co-host of Penn Sunday School, which is also one of my very favorite podcasts. I love it. And and still doing magic and stand up. What's going on with the Magic Act? Are you going to continue that into the new year?
I am. Yeah, I think I've done some Zoom shows for corporations. I think I might do some for the public now. It's in a place that I find cute, maybe not amazing, but funny and cute. So I think I might do that for the public. I am waiting for the world to get better.
Sure.
I definitely have a bunch of stuff I can't wait to get on the stage that I'm working on.
Well, I got to tell you, I've attended your show whenever you did it here at the Churn with Penn opening for you and RJ opening for you. I had the time of my life.
It was great.
That was so much fun.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's hilarious. It's a great act.
Well, thanks so much, man. I can't wait till it's back out there. Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, we'll let you get back to living, man. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks for sharing about your truth, and thanks for being such an advocate for mental health. And
absolutely.
I know we don't thank you enough, but thank you for being part of our platform. Obviously, we would not have been a relevant thing at all had you, Paul, and Jacob not, taken an interest in what we were doing and decided to be generous and share time with us, man. We're very deeply grateful.
Don't remind me.
I'm thrilled. Like I said, I take pride in it. I always say podcasts are a service, and that's whenever Jacob knows whenever we're brainstorming behind the scenes about what we're doing, I always say have to remember that we're a service. That we're providing a service to people. And so when you guys popped up as 2 therapists, I was like, well, shit, there's a service. So I was very happy to give whatever amplification I could to you guys. I'm thrilled with your show, and thanks for doing
Thank you, brother. We're grateful, man. Enjoy your day, man. Thanks so much for being with us.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
All right.
See you, buddy.
We are going to take our first break. And when we come back, we are talking about when calling the suicide hotline goes wrong. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Today's episode is brought to you by Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Carolyn Albert, and Reverend Scoop Kevin. And our theme provided to us, and thanks from our therapy producers today, is about Valentine's Day. According to the Ipsos Insights for the American Floral Endowment Consumer Tracking Study of 2004.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That one.
Trying to stop
I get the newsletter.
Yeah. When a woman buys flowers on Valentine's Day, she is most often buying them for whom?
Herself.
Gotta be herself.
If you'd like to join the Therapy Producers and make the show possible, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/.
All right. I have a real answer.
Therapy.
I have a real answer, and I
Okay.
think I got it.
Okay.
It's mom. She's buying flowers for her mother.
I would say that is a I think that's second.
Okay.
'Cause I thought mom as well.
What do you think's first?
I think herself.
You think it is herself?
Yeah,
I don't
herself
think-
is my real answer.
I don't think so.
Correct.
Damn it!
Yes.
Really?
Yep.
Oh God, I hate it when Jacob's right because then it's just in the Patreon portion he starts getting more confident about all this bullshit. Whatever. Fine. Go buy flowers for yourselves, ladies.
Is there
Don't
a
forget
list?
Mom.
Is there a ranked list there, or is it
There
just?
is, and I didn't write it down.
Great
Okay.
job.
I would guess that either mother or daughter
Oh yeah.
is number 2 on the list.
Mother, I think mother was number 2. I didn't see daughter on there.
My
I
mom
think-
still calls me every Valentine's Day to wish
Aw.
me happy Valentine's Day.
That's
Oh,
sweet.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
My mom always did that too. She'd always do something for the kids on Valentine's Day. I do something
She
for my daughter.
echolocates them.
She echolocates us. She would bring over some half bitten into fruit.
Here's some guano.
Yeah, some guano for the ointments. My daughter, it's fun. Valentine's Day is really fun when you have little kids. Like my 5-year-old daughter, I don't care about anybody else's Valentine's Day in my house. I care about hers because she loses her shit. Like I bought her a balloon. It's just a cat-shaped balloon. You'd have thought that I just like won the presidency. Like this kid was like, yes, like just running around with this balloon all day. And she's like, it's Valentine's Day. I have this balloon. And I'm like, God, that's I wish I could bottle up that joy that a kid feels over a balloon. That was a damn good Valentine's Day.
Mm-hmm.
All I had to do was give her a balloon. Anyway, these outdated references are brought to you by Nick Tangeman.
They're not that outdated.
When
This is
they're
gonna-
hearing this, it's outdated.
It's gonna be. It's Thursday. This is Sunday. Okay, it's like
Fine.
I don't know how many days that is, but it's not that long.
All right. Next question is an interesting one. It's titled, Mom Called Suicide Helpline and Was Putting Handcuffs. So, I found out last night that at some point last year, my mom was suicidal, and she called the helpline. Cops showed up at her home, took her away in handcuffs in front of her neighbors, and took her to a facility. She is not very open about telling me everything, as parents do, but what the hell? When I got off the phone, I cried in sadness and anger for hours. How does this happen? Thanks, Anonymous.
Okay. Well, so there's probably a lot of pieces of information here that we're not really privy to fully
Sure,
answer the question of how does this happen.
Right.
Yeah, we may be able to shed some light into how this could happen, under what circumstances, whatever, but it would just be an educated guess,
Yeah.
right? I mean, but
I'm assuming that this is mom was suicidal without you knowing.
Right, yeah.
yeah.
It sounds like the writer didn't even find out about it till much later.
But before we even get into that, I think we need to acknowledge the feelings of the writer and validate that.
Mm-hmm.
Because that, I think, you have every right to feel hurt, sad, angry about that situation. That's a very unfortunate situation. No one ever wants to see something like that happen to someone we love. And then also just the imagery of someone you care about being in handcuffs, right? Because handcuffs, that's a very vulnerable position to be in. So it really kind of triggers us into fear for that person's safety, right? And especially if that's your mom, that would be incredibly difficult to deal with. So your immediate reaction of fear for them and a drive to help them is absolutely warranted. So I think we first need to acknowledge that. You have every right to feel hurt, sad, angry, even about that situation, because that's a scary situation.
Now, having said that, a couple of things here that I guess need to be unpacked and observed. So first, to the general audience, the writer is describing an atypical experience. This is not common, right? And another thing that's kind of interesting about this is, okay, if you call a suicide hotline, okay, those are not local jurisdictions. Those are not attached to your police department. They are very anonymous. They are just a network. Nick's girlfriend, Laura, has literally been the person on the other side of that phone at times in her life when she signed up to be the volunteer. So you don't have to be fearful that, like, if you call, something bad's going to happen to you. That is not the case. In this situation, if I had to...
I've never heard of this happen.
No. Yeah. And so in this situation, my guess is that it's unlikely that mom called a general public suicide hotline. I suspect that mom probably was forwarded to a local jurisdiction. Otherwise, cops couldn't have come, right? Mm-hmm. So somehow...
Or maybe she just called 911.
I think she did. I think she called 911, or I think the hotline had enough reason to be concerned that they said, can we please forward you to local help?
Yeah.
Which they can do. That's part of their job, is to be available as a triage, right? So what happened in the situation is actually indicative of a systemic issue that we're currently working on in mental health and criminal justice. So police are first responders. And obviously, a big part of what they can do, a lot of times, if there's a health emergency, a lot of times they're showing up. With mental health emergencies, they often are also the first people to show up. They're not going to send firefighters. Sometimes they're not going to send an ambulance. They're going to send a police officer, because ambulances have to be quick about it. They show up, they put you on the gurney, they get you to the hospital, they go to the next heart attack, right? It's very urgent. Police can, in theory, take the time. And so a lot of times community policing is to show up on calls for mental health or suicidality. We're trying to get more and more police departments to have therapists on staff that can go to these mental health calls, but police often go. And it gets tricky, guys, because I do believe more and more officers are being trained in mental health first aid. They're being trained to sit and talk with people. However, if a person has warranted a police call to come to the house, you have to understand that the position the officer is in. The officer has to do a really quick evaluation. They're not extremely trained in this. And they have to make a decision. If I leave this place and this person ends their life, I've failed. And so sometimes the safest thing the officer can do is say, ma'am, you're going to come with me, and we're going to take you to a hospital. I don't feel safe making the call. I want to take you to a psychiatrist. I want to take you to a professional and let them make the call. And we've talked about on the show before. It's called a legal hold. We can do it, and police officers can do it. That's it. And it's very, very hard for police officers to do it. Anytime I've ever shown up to a mental health call, the officers always ask me to do it for them. Because
they don't want to do that. They're
putting you, they're waiving all of your rights. They're using the extra legal method of jumping over probable cause and taking away your liberties, which for them as a gun carrying officer of the law, that's very scary for them to do that. For me, I don't have any of their power.
And somebody who doesn't have training to assess the situation.
If they're wrong, it's their ass.
Yeah.
And so they get scared really easily. But in this situation, I suspect obviously what appears to be the case is that the officer said, okay, I'm enacting a legal hold. I have reason to believe that you're unsafe. I don't feel safe walking away from this. I'm going to bring you with me. If she said, no, I'm not going to do that, the officer in that situation is putting you on a legal hold. And if that requires putting handcuffs on you and letting you know that you're coming with them today, they're prepared to do that. And so it's not pretty. It's this ugly thing. I get it. I don't know your mother, Ryder. I'm sure that's horrifying. If my mother was put in a cruiser with cuffs, I would be horrified. And I think, under what reality did you need to do that? She's just not going to resist you.
Right. And we should say it's entirely possible that the officer or officers who put your mother in cuffs and put her in the car and everything may have just fucked up.
Well,
they may have overreacted. We don't know.
They may have.
There are a lot of options here.
But I want to add to that, Ryder, there's actually a reason why they put you in cuffs. And so I was empathizing with you to say, I get it, it's very scary, but that's actually protocol. And there's a reason for that. This patient is suicidal. You're bringing them in because you believe they are a threat to their own life and safety. If you put them in the back of your cruiser and you didn't restrain them and they hurt themselves,
that's also a problem.
Explain why you didn't take that precaution. It's not going to permanently hurt the person or put their life in danger to restrain their arms. So it's normal procedure, actually. And this is true in psych hospitals, too. They take a lot of your stuff, shoelaces, and there's just normal procedure whenever a person is exhibiting suicidality. So this does happen, Ryder. I know it can be off-putting. I know it can be scary. It is not super common that it goes down this way. But yes, that can happen. And in the story, the mother was taken to a mental health facility to be cleared.
And I believe for the most part, that's if the person doesn't want to go. Obviously, if the person is willing to go willingly, I've seen it happen a lot, but it's usually, in my experience, when this has happened, it's usually the fire department EMTs. They're usually the first that always show up is the fire department's EMTs.
Usually.
And they will usually, I mean, and this is just my experience, so it could be different in different communities, but they will usually take the person, if they're willing to go, they'll be like, all right, hey, let's hop into this ambulance. We'll run you down to the hospital.
Yeah.
And, they'll just put them on the gurney or whatever, but they don't really, they'll restrain them in a sense that you have to in a moving vehicle.
They'll put a seatbelt on them.
Right, yeah. But they're not going to handcuff them or anything like that unless the person then decides like, nope, I've changed my mind. I don't want to go. I'm not going to go. And then they're like, well, you don't really have a choice now.
Now we're going.
Now we have to go.
Right.
So, yeah, it's unfortunate and it's really painful to see that. So I definitely empathize.
Certainly.
That doesn't mean it was wrong. And so I guess, Ryder, I think on a human level, we're with you. I know that that's off-putting. I know that's startling. For all the listeners out there who are thinking, wait a minute, this can happen. Yes, but please don't let that scare you. If you are in danger, remember what this officer or the responder is having to think through. They're having to make the decision that they may, and they have to treat it as seriously as a heart attack, right? Or as seriously as a person who could shoot another person. They have to end the threat to human life. And in this case, that meant going ahead and restraining this person who could threaten her own life and taking her to the facility. That's called a legal hold, Ryder. And there's a reason why it's allowed to happen. It's temporary. Usually you can only put somebody in legal hold for 72 hours. The only two powers that can do that are a licensed therapist and a police officer. Even EMTs and firefighters can't do it, which is why if it's a mental health call, they'll send out a cop. Because if the legal hold needs to be enacted and the person's not willing to get help, they need the cop to authorize it and to do it and to bring them in. And that often means bringing them in either in an ambulance or in the back of a cruiser. I realize that's scary. I realize that looks the same way that you would treat a drug dealer or somebody who'd committed a crime. But you have to just remember that these are your public services and they're just bringing an end to the threat to human life, which is sometimes messy and not always pleasant, but is essential, friend. It is essential. And I tell you the truth, Ryder, I'm glad that they responded to your mother. I'm glad they took your mother seriously. And I hope that she's doing well. I hope that she's getting help. I would encourage you as a family member to just check on her regularly. Parents, and I'm assuming your mother might be a little bit more of a senior citizen. I don't know. You didn't say. But geriatric depression is very serious. It's a really big thing in our society. Social isolation is really big for them. And it's very common for parents to not feel comfortable telling their children about their own mental illness because obviously you just protect your kids and you just don't want it to make it their problem. So I get it. I know that's scary. And I'm sorry that this happened, Ryder, but at the end of the day, that's how the system is built, and it's built to save lives.
And that is, it sounds to me, and from my experience in it, limited experience, certainly, it sounds to me like that is an atypical situation.
Yeah,
like that is not what's going to happen all the time. So if you need help, call for help.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I just want to say, as far as you not knowing about your mother being suicidal at that point, just think back through your life and think about how easy it is if you're having a shitty day one day, if you're in a bad mood one day.
Right.
Does everyone around you know that you're having a shitty day that day?
Yeah.
No, you don't advertise that.
Right.
You're able to conceal that from everyone, and that doesn't make them bad people for not knowing that you're having a shitty day. Just like it doesn't make you a bad person not knowing all of your mother's feelings when she was actively hiding them from you.
That's right.
So you can't take that onto you because
Right.
that's just not you. That's just that part of it is simply not on you, and that is there is no blame on you at all.
That's true.
Insofar as that goes.
And it gets even more complicated too when you talk about like chronic depression, because then
Right.
it's not just having a bad day, then it's constantly, and then you can very easily just be like, well, that's the way I've always known them. So you don't really pick up on things.
Yeah.
So so I agree. It's not anything that you should be upset about yourself.
And remember, folks, if you have a family member who's going through depression, especially with suicidality, you have a stakeholdership in their life, and you have the right to ask them, hey, are you doing okay? Oh, I'm fine, honey. Don't worry about it. Are you seeing anybody? Are you getting any help? Are you doing any medicine? Oh, it'll work itself out. No, you have the right as a stakeholder, as a family member, to bring accountability and to say, Ma, I really am going to ask you to do something with this. I'll take you to the doctor. I'll help you find a therapist. If you're intimidated, I will help you solve this. But join them, Ryder. And I'm glad you're writing in about it. I'm glad you're attentive to it. I understand your shock. Hopefully we've normalized the experience a little bit for you and helped you understand why it happened. Again, not knowing all the facts on the ground. And then also described it as atypical. So yeah, that is still a little bit startling, but also not unheard of. And there's reasons for it. It has to do with saving human life.
Yeah. Would rather your mom be in handcuffs than something worse.
Than a grave. That's right.
Yeah.
So rooting for you, writer. Thank you for writing in. And, remember, folks, if you're struggling, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling suicidal, do not hesitate. It's okay to call for help. You don't have to be scared that anybody's going to come knock down your door. That is not what happens. They are not trying to intimidate you or scare you. But if they judge the situation serious enough, they will rightfully save your life. And, again, that's a very high bar, folks. That's a very high bar. But don't let that discourage you. At the end of the day, do the next right thing. That is your responsibility to do the next right thing. If you do that, everything will work out. Okay. And that mother's fine. And alive today, probably because she did the right thing and reached out for help. So anyway, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, we're going to close out the show with a letter from Robert Brownie Jr. Mint. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
Today's episode is brought to you by Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Carolyn Albert, Reverend Scoop, Kevin. Our second trivia question, in honor of our Thera producers, keeping with our theme of Valentine's Day, is: although there were several St. Valentine's... I'm sorry. Let me start over.
Tom Hanks.
Although there were several St. Valentines, most scholars believe that Valentine's Day was intended to honor a priest who attracted the displeasure of the Roman Emperor Claudius II for defying what order? If you would like to join the Thera producers and make the show possible, you can go to patreon.com/therapy and sign up. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
A priest defied an order of a Roman emperor, and we commemorate him with Valentine's Day.
Yes.
A day of love and chocolate.
And we want to know what order he violated?
Yes. Okay. What was the order of Claudius II?
Claudius II
defied.
Some historians look back and say Claudius II was more unhinged than Nero.
I was more of a fan of Claudius I.
You would be.
I thought Claudius I had a lot of good ideas. Claudius II, not a fan. I'm going to come out on it. That's the Pod Therapy criticism of ancient Roman emperors. I'm going to go with he violated a law, probably to treat people a certain way. He probably declined to do that, and it probably said that he had to be kind to people or something like that. I'm going to say he gave sanctuary to a marginalized population, and now we celebrate his love.
Wow, that's very nonspecific.
He gave sanctuary to gypsies. That's what I'm going for.
Okay. Yeah. Now we're just going to start throwing around the word gypsy in this podcast?
Is that a slur?
Is that what we're going to do?
Is that a slur?
Yeah, I believe it is. Yeah,
okay. He gave sanctuary to traveling Irish people.
They're...
What?
You guys not seen...
All right, Jacob.
This is... You guys haven't seen that movie where Brad Pitt's a gypsy and he's a boxer and he's Irish?
Ireland?
I think so.
No.
I think he lives in like a little RV and he's like a gypsy. I should probably stop saying the word gypsy, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Jim's talking about the movie Snatch.
That one.
Okay.
Yeah. Great movie. It
is a good movie.
It is a solid movie.
Yeah.
And that's where 100% of my information comes from. What's your guess?
Oh, that's obvious.
Yeah.
Let's see. I will guess a ban on physical contact.
Ooh. Okay. You think the priest would be cool with it?
I think there's a ban on physical contact with people outside of your family.
Oh, okay. I feel like
I'm making this up out of
wearing
a
mask during a pandemic, and the priest said, "Not I."
Yeah, something
Claudius II.
That's it.
So Saint Valentine continued to marry young people, which was defying the order of Claudius II, who was outlawing marriage.
Oh.
Because Claudius II came to the conclusion that single men were better soldiers.
Oh.
All right.
Wow.
So there
That's
you
an
go.
interesting thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And after you get married,
Yeah.
there is physical contact. I was right.
He's technically
Right.
right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. My theory a little off, but not by much. Not by much. Let the record show.
No.
It was
Pretty
okay.
off.
It
Pretty
was
off.
okay.
Maybe on the other side of the road. Yeah.
Not-
On the other side.
I put Robert Brownie Jr. Mint's letter in the Patreon part.
Oh.
That's what that was. That's what I had said.
Oh. I don't listen to most of what you say.
I know.
Agreed.
Okay. So we're reading this on Patreon.
Yes.
Okay.
After the show, stick around.
Yeah.
We'll read Robert Brownie Jr. Mint's letter.
That's fair because we're out of
Okay.
time anyway. So
Oh, we are.
Yeah.
Aren't we? Damn.
That worked out
Jeez.
pretty good.
Okay.
We do want to recognize Patreons. We want to thank our newest Therapal, who we missed in January, Brendan Loonsbury.
Lounsbury, I assume.
Don't act like you know how to pronounce it.
It's clearly, dude. That's not even.
Yeah, you're probably right. It definitely is Lou, so I should probably get the ow sound in there. Lounsbury. That feels right. Brendan, thanks for joining the show. We also want to thank our newest Therapod, Heather. Just Heather. Thanks, Heather. And we want to thank a new Therodactyl. We got Angie Ellis in the crew. Welcome to the gaggle, Angie. And we want to thank our producers, the Saccharin 16, the mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of the fan club. Thank you, producers Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider, Robert Brownie Jr. Mint, Kayla Lansbury, Ellie O'Dare, Jody Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Don, Crazy Banana Scoop, Mason Miller, Scott Jameson, Carolyn Albert, Leon Kassab, Reverend Scoop, Kevin, and Malaya.
If you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited
And why wouldn't you?
and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, go to patreon.com/therapy. And thank you for supporting mental health.
That's all the time that we got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, Pod Therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Share this episode with someone who needs it by opening the episode subscription in your podcast app. Copy and paste that link we provided into your social media. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter at PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy. That's you, Nick.
Yeah. Do you want to submit a question to the show? Ask anonymously at podtherapy.net and email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangeman.
Jovin.
Thanks. We'll see you for your appointment next week.
I'm gone for a couple of weeks. You've lost your edge.
I never had an edge.
Jim's mustache is throwing off next time.
It is.
It is. It's in all of its glory.
I'm not sure if I should look directly at it or look away from it.
Never look right into it. It's like the solar eclipse.
It'll grab you.